In 1987, the Lost Boys introduced the coolest vampires cinema had ever produced. By 2026, one of its stars was arrested at midnight in Hollywood after allegedly punching an Uber driver. One is a billionaire who co-owns an NBA team, and one of the original Coreys has been dead for 16 years. Here's where the Lost Boys cast actually ended up. The legal trouble, the money, the losses, and the Broadway musical nobody expected in 2026. KIEFER Sutherland. David, most people remember him standing at the edge of a cliff. Bleach blonde hair, leather jacket, a half smile that said he knew exactly how dangerous he was. David, the leader of the Santa Carla Vampire Pack, remains one of the most iconic villain introductions in 1980s cinema. He was 20 when the film shot, already had Stand By Me behind him, already had the bone structure and the intensity that suggested the camera was going to keep paying attention to him for a very long time. That turned out to be correct. The Lost Boys made him a movie star. What made him a cultural institution was 24. From 2001 to 2014, he played Jack Bauer, the counterterrorism agent who did whatever the situation required, no matter the cost, across 8 seasons and over 200 episodes. At the peak of the show, he was the highest-earning actor on television. Emmy, Golden Globe. The show became a genuine cultural phenomenon, referenced in political speeches, academic papers on post-9/11 anxiety, think pieces about what America wanted from its heroes after the towers fell. He followed it with Designated Survivor, a low-level cabinet member who unexpectedly becomes President of the United States after an attack on the Capitol. Different energy from Jack Bauer, but the same compressed intensity. The same quality of someone who never fully stops watching The Room. What's easy to forget, looking at those 2 television landmarks back to back, is how different they actually were. Jack Bauer operated in a world of permanent crisis, physical extremity, and moral compromise. Tom Kirkman was almost the opposite. An accidental leader trying to do the right thing in a system that kept trying to corrupt him. That Sutherland was equally convincing in both says something real about his range that his movie career, for all its success, never quite got to demonstrate. By 2026, his relationship with the industry had gotten more complicated. He's talked in interviews about feeling in a vulnerable spot, a leading man who sees the industry's appetite for him shifting in ways he hasn't fully accepted. That's an honest thing to say out loud. Most actors in that position don't. Then came January 12, 2026. Just after midnight, near Sunset Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue in Hollywood, an Uber driver called 911. He'd been attacked. Police reports state Sutherland got into the car, turned violent, and threatened the driver's life. Allegedly, he punched the driver multiple times and tried to choke him. Officers on the scene noted he appeared heavily under the influence. He was booked on suspicion of felony criminal threats. $50,000 bail. Released 7 hours later. This wasn't his first encounter with law enforcement. He served 48 days in jail for DUI and probation violation in 2007. Arrested for violence again in 2009. Those charges were dropped. The pattern is there, even if each incident has its own context. What's running parallel to all of this is something nobody expected. Alongside his acting career, Sutherland has built a serious second career as a country and Americana musician. Not a vanity project, not celebrity side hustle content. In spring 2026, he was touring Europe on his Love Will Bring You Home tour. Intimate venues, his 4th studio album Grey, acoustic sets in places like London's Union Chapel. Reviewers praised his grizzled authenticity. They noted he treats music like a craftsman, not a celebrity looking for a hobby. The music career actually stretches back further than most people realize. He released his debut album Down in a Hole in 2016 and has continued building a genuine following in country and Americana circles that has nothing to do with Jack Bauer. He said that music gives him something acting doesn't. A directness of expression that doesn't require anyone else's script. For someone who has spent 4 decades playing other people's versions of intensity, that probably makes sense. He's 59, making music, facing legal proceedings, visiting Broadway casts. Still, somehow, impossible to look away from. But while KIEFER Sutherland's 2026 became a headline for all the wrong reasons, Two of his former co-stars were living through something far more permanent. Corey Haim, Sam Emerson, he played Sam, the younger brother, the comic heart of the film, the one with the posters on his bedroom wall, and the dog named Nanook. The audience surrogate in a movie full of darkness. Off-screen, he was a teen idol, genuinely famous in the way 1980s teen fame worked. Magazine covers, screaming fans, the full machinery of celebrity aimed at someone who was still a kid. The machinery ground him up. His adult life was defined by a long battle with addiction, something he talked about publicly and painfully, across interviews and a reality television series he did with Corey Feldman in the mid-2000s. He tried. He relapsed. He tried again. The industry that had made him famous at 14 had moved on long before he had any tools to deal with what that felt like. Before The Lost Boys, he had already shown genuine range. Lucas in 1986, a coming-of-age drama in which he played a socially awkward teenager, navigating first love, was considered one of the finest performances by a young actor of that decade. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars and singled out Haim specifically. He was more than the teen idol the magazines wanted him to be. He was an actual actor, with instincts and vulnerability that didn't need to be manufactured. That's what makes the trajectory of his adult life particularly difficult to sit with. The talent was clearly there. What wasn't there, what the industry never provided, and what the fame never created space for, were the basic support structures that might have helped him navigate what came next. He died on March 10, 2010. He was 38 years old. Initial coverage suggested an overdose. The autopsy told a more complicated story. The official cause of death was natural causes: pneumonia, heart issues, though his past drug use was considered a contributing factor. His body had simply been through too much for too long. He was 38. He deserved more time and more support than this industry ever gave him. Corey Feldman, Edgar Frog. He played Edgar Frog, the self-appointed vampire hunter, the kid with the army surplus gear, and absolute conviction that the monsters were real. One of the most memorable performances in the film, delivered by a teenager who had been acting professionally since he was a small child. Feldman survived what Haim didn't. But survival came with its own costs. His career in the 1980s was genuinely extraordinary for someone his age. Gremlins, The Goonies, Stand By Me, The Lost Boys. 4 culturally significant films in 4 years, across completely different genres, all delivering performances that held up against adult co-stars. He was a working professional actor before most kids his age had formed any clear sense of what they wanted to do with their lives. The allegations he eventually made public about sexual abuse he and Haim experienced as child actors in Hollywood have to be understood against that backdrop. He wasn't talking about peripheral figures. He was talking about the people who ran the industry that had employed him as a child. The courage required to maintain those allegations publicly, for years, against institutional resistance, is significant whatever one's view of how he went about it. In 2020, he produced and released My Truth, The Rape of Two Coreys, a documentary detailing those allegations on the record. He had been making these claims publicly for years before that, naming names, facing industry pushback, facing public skepticism. The documentary was his attempt to put the full account down permanently. Whatever one thinks of how he's gone about his advocacy, the underlying subject matter is real: child abuse in Hollywood, institutional silence, the specific vulnerability of young actors in a system with no protections. He has been one of the very few people from that era willing to name it directly, and keep naming it, for decades. By 2026, his personal situation had become genuinely difficult. A bitter, public divorce from Courtney Mitchell, and his net worth? Approximately $50,000. To put that in perspective, while his former co-star Jami Gertz plays in the Billionaire leagues, one of the most famous teenagers of the 1980s is living on the financial edge. The Hollywood machine made him famous, ate everything it could find, and left him to fight for the scraps. In June 2026, he was briefly hospitalized after severe food poisoning during an in-flight medical emergency. He recovered. He's in his mid-50s. He's still fighting for his legacy, for the story he's been trying to tell for decades, for a financial stability that keeps slipping away. You don't have to agree with everything he's done to recognize he's been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. And speaking of the financial edge, before we get to the cast member who ended up on the exact opposite side of that spectrum, let's take a moment for the ones who built something quieter and steadier. Jason Patric, Michael Emerson. He played Michael, the older brother, the one pulled into the vampire world, the film's central character in a lot of ways. Quiet intensity against Sutherland's theatrical menace. The role required someone who could be genuinely compelling without dominating the frame, and Patric did exactly that. After The Lost Boys, Patric built a career that deliberately avoided the blockbuster path. Rush in 1991, a gritty undercover drug thriller that earned him serious critical attention. Sleepers in 1996, alongside Brad Pitt, Kevin Bacon, and Robert De Niro, a film that required holding his own in scenes with three of the most established actors of that generation, which he did. Your Friends and Neighbors in 1998, a dark Neil LaBute ensemble drama that further demonstrated his comfort with difficult, morally uncomfortable material. He consistently chose character work over commercial spectacle. The Machine occasionally lost interest in him because of that. He seemed to regard that as an acceptable trade. What's less discussed is his off-screen life, which included a legal battle over parental rights for his son Liam that became a significant story in the mid-2010s. He fought for years through the California court system for recognition as his child's legal father. The case led to changes in California family law, a quiet, real-world consequence that had nothing to do with the entertainment industry, but reflected the same tenacity he brought to his acting choices. In 2025, he joined the cast of Law & Order: Organized Crime, bringing him back to mainstream television visibility after years of more selective work. He also stars in the 2026 film Man of War. In June 2026, he visited the Broadway cast of the Lost Boys musical and celebrated publicly what the original film had become. He's 59, working on his own terms. Some careers age better than others, and his is one of them. Dianne Wiest, Lucy Emerson. She played Lucy, the mother trying to hold her family together, while Santa Carla turned out to be considerably more dangerous than the real estate listing suggested. Supporting role, horror comedy, and she had already won an Oscar by the time she made it. Best Supporting Actress for Hannah and Her Sisters in 1987. The same year, she'd go on to win a second for Bullets Over Broadway in 1995. 2 Academy Awards, a Tony nomination, decades of stage and screen work that puts her in a completely different tier from almost everyone else in this ensemble. What's remarkable about her career is the range across which those awards were earned. Hannah and Her Sisters was Woody Allen at his most formally sophisticated. Bullets Over Broadway required physical comedy timing and a completely different register. Her work in between, Parenthood, Edward Scissorhands, Practical Magic, In Treatment, covered virtually every dramatic mode available to a working actress. She has never been trapped by type, which is either a function of remarkable craft or remarkable selectivity, and probably both. In 2025, she won an Obie Award, one of the most respected honors in American theater, for her stage work in Scene Partners. She continues to star in Mayor of Kingstown on Paramount+. She is 76 years old, and she shows no signs of slowing down. Weirdly, she might be the most accomplished person in this entire cast. She's definitely the most decorated, and she's still the one most people primarily remember as the mom from The Lost Boys, which she would probably find amusing. Now, you've been patient. Here's the part of this story that genuinely nobody could have predicted in 1987. Jami Gertz, Star. She played Star, the mysterious girl, half-turned vampire, the love interest caught between two worlds, ethereal, compelling, and then she essentially walked away from Hollywood at the height of her fame. What she walked toward is one of the most extraordinary pivots in Hollywood history. Full stop. She married financier Tony Ressler in 1989. He co-founded Ares Management, one of the largest alternative investment firms in the world. She kept acting through the 1990s and 2000s. Twister, Still Standing, various television work, but the center of gravity in her life had shifted entirely. Her television career during that period was more substantial than it often gets credited for. Still Standing, the CBS sitcom she co-starred in from 2002 to 2006, ran for 4 seasons and earned consistent ratings. She was also active in philanthropic work well before the NBA ownership made her one of the most prominent figures in Los Angeles charitable circles. The wrestler Gertz Foundation has donated hundreds of millions of dollars to educational, medical, and arts institutions over the years. The $50 million LACMA gift was a continuation of a pattern, not an anomaly. In 2015, she and wrestler became co-owners of the NBA's Atlanta Hawks. Let That Land, the vampire love interest from a 1987 cult horror film, co-owns a professional basketball franchise. By 2026, their combined net worth is estimated at approximately $8 billion. That's more than Oprah Winfrey's estimated net worth. More than Taylor Swift's. The woman who played a half-vampire love interest in a movie about teenage bloodsuckers is now one of the most financially powerful people in American sport. In April 2026, she donated $50 million to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. A single philanthropic gift that exceeded the entire career earnings of most working actors. She still acts occasionally. She genuinely doesn't need to. Of every person in this cast, Jami Gertz had the most complete reinvention, not into another version of entertainment, but into an entirely different category of existence. She went from playing a girl who couldn't escape the vampires to becoming one of the most financially powerful women in American sport. Nobody in that 1987 cast saw that coming. Nobody. The ones who didn't make it this cast lost people, and they deserve more than a passing mention. Edward Herrmann played Max, the seemingly normal video store owner who turns out to be the head vampire. Quietly menacing in a way that worked precisely because he looked so ordinary for so long. His career stretched across 5 decades. The Paper Chase, Gilmore Girls, The Good Wife, dozens of films and television series. He was particularly beloved for his recurring role as Richard Gilmore on Gilmore Girls, which introduced him to an entirely new generation of viewers who may not have known his earlier work at all. His warmth in that role, the formal, sometimes difficult father who genuinely loved his family underneath the reserve, became one of the most widely praised supporting performances in early 2000s television. Cast members from that show have spoken about his generosity on set, his professionalism, his decency. He died in December 2014. Brain cancer. He was 71. Barnard Hughes played Grandpa, the eccentric taxidermist whose moment in the film's final act remains one of its best jokes. A small role that stuck with audiences for decades. He had a long, distinguished theater career alongside his film and television work. A Tony Award for Da in 1978. A career that stretched from Broadway to primetime television to film work across 5 decades. The kind of performer who elevated every production he was part of simply by being genuinely committed to the work. He was 72 when he made The Lost Boys. The film was a small part of a very large career. He died in July 2006. He was 90 years old. Brooke McCarter played Paul, one of the vampire pack, the blonde one. His energy contributed to the visual identity of the group in ways that are easy to underestimate until you try to imagine the film without him. He largely stepped away from acting in the years following The Lost Boys, working occasionally in smaller productions while staying connected to the fan community around the original film. By all accounts, he remained warm toward the movie's legacy and the people who loved it, attending conventions and participating in cast reunions where his schedule allowed. He died in March 2015 from a rare liver disorder. He was 52. 3 cast members. 3 different stories. 3 very different distances from the film that connected them all. The Broadway Revival, 2026. Nobody saw this coming. In April 2026, The Lost Boys, a new musical, opened at the Palace Theater on Broadway. 12 Tony nominations. 4 wins, including Best Featured Actor for the actor playing David, the role KIEFER Sutherland made iconic. The production made one significant change. Michael doesn't get tricked into joining the vampires this time. He chooses to, which reframes the whole story as something considerably darker and more honest than the original film attempted. Both Sutherland and Patrick visited the cast in June 2026. They showed up. That says something. A 1987 cult horror film about teenage vampires is now a Tony Award-winning Broadway musical. That sentence would have made no sense in 1987. But here we are. One film, One Summer Night in Santa Carla, 1987. A billionaire, a Broadway hit, a midnight arrest, and a death at 38. For a lot of people, The Lost Boys still lives in that image on the cliff. Real life turned out considerably darker than that.